Hey lifers, Dustin here, and today I'm going to talk about the biggest thing, the only thing in the college football world this week, and that was the College Football Playoff Committee's final top 4 or top 6 rankings and how they kind of move the pieces around after Championship Saturday. Now, I don't want this video to be too long. It was already beat to death on Sunday, pretty hardcore. Also, real quick, shame on the playoff committee for not having it at noon. You jerks. You knew we were going to tune in at noon. You weren't wrestling with it so deeply that you couldn't have it in by noon. F you guys. You guys made us wait till like 12:35. Jerks. So as everybody knows by now, the Final Four was 1 Alabama, because duh. They moved Clemson up to 2 after the win over Virginia Tech. Ohio State 3, getting in obviously without winning their division or conference. And Washington at 4, even though they have a really weak strength of schedule, or non-conference strength of schedule. In fact, it was second worst in the country. It was 127 out of 128, which is not good. So basically, because I don't really want to waste a lot of your time, I'm just going to kind of run down a few thoughts that I have on the College Football Playoff Committee, especially when looking back at the last 2 years and what is the criteria they're looking for. The Big 12 commissioner is asking the same question, like, in 2014, you wanted us to have a conference championship game, so we're getting one, but Ohio State got in without one. You yell at us for teams like Baylor scheduling, doo-doo teams out of conference, but you put Washington in. So what is it exactly you want? These are all very fair questions, and I'm going to try to break it down as much as I can, as quickly as I can. The first question, the first identity crisis that this committee has is the overall argument. Should you be the 4 best teams? Should the 4 best teams get in? Or should the 4 most deserving teams get in? And what happens when those are not the same teams? I think we all want the best teams in the country to play each other. I don't really think there's much of a debate about that. But if you're only going to have 4 slots, should it be the teams that we think are the best, or the teams that have proven themselves by playing conference championship games or stronger out of conference scheduling? See, I'm kind of in the minority here because I think it is the most deserving teams. Now, most people think it should be for the 4 best teams. I think it should be for the 4 most deserving, and my reasoning is I think the BCS was for the 2 best teams. If you were the best team, you got into the BCS National Championship game. And really, if you think back to all of those BCS title games, did they really get it wrong that often? I mean, everyone points right to 2004 in Auburn. Rightly so. That's fine. Especially after USC murdered Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. I think it was the Orange Bowl. But other than that, I think they mostly got the best teams in the BCS title game. Look at the 2012 BCS title game between LSU and Alabama. I clearly thought those were the 2 best teams in the country. I thought if either of them played Oklahoma State, that they would have beaten Oklahoma State. But Oklahoma State was more deserving than Alabama because they won their conference championship and their only loss was not to the team already in the title. But again, the BCS was designed for the best teams. But we had a lot of people complaining then, and we have a lot of people complaining now. So did we really fix things that much? For the record, my Final 4 would have been, in this order, Alabama, Clemson, Penn State, and Washington. That's just me. Most people have Ohio State in there, and that's fine. I don't hate that Ohio State's in there. I just wish the College Football Playoff Committee was more consistent in their criteria. So what exactly is the Playoff Committee's criteria? First off, do conference championships matter? I don't know. In 2014, they used TCU or Baylor not being the clear-cut Big 12 champion, even though it was clearly Baylor, to place Ohio State in the playoff because they said Ohio State won a conference championship. Okay, well, last year, all 4 finalists were conference champions. This year, only 3 are. Once again, Ohio State gets the benefit of the doubt because they're Ohio State, probably. They had a very tough schedule, but do conference championships matter? The committee's kind of vague on that. Does head-to-head matter? Yes and no. See, TCU lost to Baylor in 2014, and Baylor finished ahead of them in the rankings. Penn State beat Ohio State in 2016, and Ohio State finished ahead of Penn State in the rankings. Now, it's a little different because Ohio State only had one loss versus two for Penn State, but it is interesting. Does head-to-head matter? I think yes, because Ohio State also beat Oklahoma, and that's the reason Oklahoma was never really in contention for a playoff spot. One of the ideas that I really despise about college football is the idea of if you're going to lose, lose early. Why? Like, objectively, what's the difference if you did not have rankings? What's the difference between losing in September and losing in November? Nothing. The only difference is we have no perceived conception of you in September, and you can get better throughout the year. When if you lose in November, we already have you ranked higher, and therefore you drop out of the conversation. It doesn't make any sense. And Penn State's losses were early, and Ohio State's loss was to Penn State. Michigan had some late losses that dropped them out. Clemson had a late loss that could have doomed them if all the other teams around them didn't lose around that time as well. Washington also, same thing as Clemson, Michigan, late losses, but the others kind of helped bolster them, while Wisconsin lost early and was sticking around the top 10, top 5 conversation for a lot of the season. Now, this one involves Ohio State, but I think this is one of the good cases for Ohio State being in the playoff. The question is, do out-of-conference strength of schedule matter? I don't know. You see, Washington got in with the second worst non-conference strength of schedule. I don't know why I keep... non-conference strength of schedule in the country. So that, they talked about it all Sunday. That could tell athletic directors, hey, just schedule doo-doo teams. Who cares? Just schedule them. Whatever happens, happens. But you could look at the other case, the other side of the coin, and it's Ohio State, who scheduled Oklahoma, went into Norman and beat the Sooners down, and that's one of the reasons why they were ranked in the top 2 in the next to last college football playoff poll. And that's why they got into the playoff to begin with. To kind of piggyback off that a little bit, do overall losses matter? Yes. Ohio State only had one loss, Penn State had 2 losses, Michigan had 2 losses, so they were on the outside looking in, while Ohio State was on the inside looking out with all the other one-loss teams. If you just look at losses, Alabama's undefeated, Clemson has 1 loss, Ohio State has 1 loss, Washington has 1 loss. And I'm going to talk about something I'm not supposed to talk about, which is, does politics make a difference? I think the answer to that is unequivocally yes. Let me ask you this. I'm just going to throw this out here. Again, I'm not tossing shade at Ohio State. I'm just throwing this out here. Imagine that Ohio State lost to, what's a middle-of-the-road ACC team? Ohio State lost to Miami, right? In Miami to start the year. And then they played Wisconsin and lost to Wisconsin by 39 points. Okay? Ohio State goes the rest of the season, gets better and better and better. Some things go their way late. They beat Michigan just like they did. They go and they play Nebraska. We'll switch Wisconsin to Nebraska in this scenario. They beat Nebraska in the Big Ten championship game. They're sitting there 11-2. They already had they were number 7. They're 11-2 and they're Big Ten champions. Penn State, on the other hand, their only loss of the year is to Ohio State on a blocked field goal in Columbus. All right? Flip the scenarios as much as we can. Are you going to sit here and try to tell me that Ohio State does not make the playoff? I think because of Ohio State's brand, because of their history, because of their tradition, because of Urban Meyer, because of the players they have, because of their fan base, because of what they've brought to college football over the last several decades, Ohio State could have made the playoff in that scenario, while Penn State, with everything that happened with Joe Paterno, they're a little bit lesser of a brand now than they used to be, and we didn't have very high expectations for them at the beginning of the year. I think at 11-2, Ohio State, Big Ten champion, definitely makes the playoff. I don't even think we're having the conversation. I think they would point to Penn State and say, well, you lost to Ohio State, And Ohio State won the conference championship, so no, you don't get in. And I think everybody, for the most part, would have been okay with it. But because it's Ohio State, they get preferential treatment over the others. That's just my personal opinion. Let me know what you guys think down below. So there you have it. That's my really quick kind of take on the final college football playoff committee rankings. I think politics were definitely involved here. I think they're shooting for an Ohio State-Alabama national championship game. Or if Clemson beats Ohio State, then it'll be Clemson and Alabama in the rematch in the national championship game. An all-South championship. It'll be Alabama versus Clemson in Tampa. So either way, they could not lose. I think that's why they maybe have, they have Clemson and Ohio State 2-3, even though Washington was a conference champion. Although, again, Ohio State played much better competition than Washington did. I assume pretty much everybody thinks Alabama's going to beat Washington to move on to the championship game. And the committee knows either a rematch against against Ohio State from the 2014 playoff, or Clemson from the 2015 national championship game will get a lot of views and a lot of anticipation. So really, it was a win-win either way for the playoff. But I think the losses killed Penn State. Because you can say, well, what are they supposed to do? Not schedule Pittsburgh? If I think David Pollack asked on ESPN Sunday, he said, if instead of Pittsburgh, Penn State had scheduled Portland State, do you think Penn State's in the playoff? Well, the answer is probably yeah, because they wouldn't have, I hope, would not have lost that game. No offense to Portland State. Overall losses matter. Politics matter. Brand matters. Conference championships don't matter unless they do, and head-to-head doesn't matter unless they do. So the bad news is there is no formula to get in the college football playoff. It really will be a case-by-case, year-by-year thing. We're going to have this debate forever. Unless we go to 8 teams, in which case number 9 and number 10 will be yelling at us. I don't know, that's just my thoughts. I desperately want to know what you guys have to say down below. Thank y'all very much for watching this. I really appreciate it. If you want to subscribe, you can click on the circle right down there. There's other videos of mine over there. Make sure to drop a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And as always, until next time. 12:35. Jerks. So as everybody knows by now, the Final Four was 1 Alabama, because duh. They moved Clemson up to 2 after the win over Virginia Tech. Ohio State 3. Getting in, obviously, without winning their division or conference. And Washington at 4. Hey, lifers, Dustin here. And today I'm going to talk about the biggest thing, the only thing in the college football world this week. And that was the College Football Playoff Committee's final top 4 or top 6 rankings and how they kind of move the pieces around after Championship Saturday. Now, I don't want this video to be too long. I have on the College Football Playoff Committee, especially when looking back at the last 2 years and what is the criteria they're looking for. The Big 12 commissioner is asking the same question, like, in 2014, you wanted us to have a conference championship game, so we're getting one. But Ohio, it was already beat to death on Sunday, pretty hardcore. Also, real quick, shame on the playoff committee for not having it at noon. You jerks. You knew we were going to tune in at noon. You weren't wrestling with it so deeply that you couldn't have it in by noon. F you guys. You guys made us wait till like 12, even though they have a really weak strength of schedule, or non-conference strength of schedule. In fact, it was second worst in the country. It was 127 out of 128, which is not good. So basically, because I don't really want to waste a lot of your time, I'm just going to kind of run down a few thoughts that